Welcome to the first episode of the Takapuna Beach Business Association podcast. I'm Monique Bradley from Starlight Media House, and here today on the show we have Eddie Borrie, Director of MBS Advertising Agency, a full-service accredited advertising agency specialising in the planning and buying of media. Before we get started, I'd like to invite you all to check us out online at starlightmediahouse.co.nz if you haven't already done so. We're a multimedia production house, live event and entertainment specialists, and we especially enjoy working with local businesses, creating interesting audiovisual packages. We'd love to hear from you and are always keen to meet other locals in the community. Likewise, you can subscribe to this podcast and send through any thoughts and suggestions for future episodes from our site or from takapunabeach.co.nz. Hello Eddie, welcome to the show.
Hello, thanks for being
Yay. All right, well before we get started today, would you like to share with our listeners what it is that MBS Advertising does?
Absolutely. We're a media-driven advertising agency as opposed to the traditional creative-driven agency. Mm-hmm. So our strength is in planning and buying the most cost-effective media that is available in New Zealand for a specific client and their media needs.
Okay.
Now, because of that, we subcontract in creative as needed, and that's something that cuts the cost right down. We don't have anyone sitting around our office waiting for a job, and we can pick the specialist that understands the creative that suits, because you can't always have somebody trying to work out how to advertise a truck and the next day to advertise cosmetics. You get specialists in every force, and that saves a lot of time and a lot of money for a client.
Great. Okay, so there's the term floating around that is a new term for me, media placement. Can you explain what this means? So as a person on the other side of the spectrum, and I'm looking at getting my brand out there, what is media placement all about? So you're talking about joining up the people with the wanting to get their brand out there and making it happen. Okay. What is that about?
The biggest part of media placement is finding the target market. Now, whatever your business or your product is, you will have a specific target market. And so as a media company or as a business person, you must find out who the target is that you're aiming for. Yeah. Because if you get that wrong, then you waste your money.
Of course. Yeah.
So as soon as you've found the target, then you look for the finest part of it. It might be household shoppers, and you say, fine, is that 80-year-olds or is it 25-year-olds? So you get the age right.
Got you.
Then you get the socio-demographic. Is it socio 1 and 2, which are the upper levels, or is it down to as low as the bottom level where they don't have the money to buy a brand new house? So you identify where it is before you start your planning.
Got you. Fantastic. When a business chooses to contract somebody like you for their media buying, or they decide to contract their media buying to an advertising agency such as you, what happens, what's the process, and what exactly are the managed services that they pay for?
We basically become their marketing division.
Great.
In the right short term. We'll go in, we'll learn as much as we can about their business. Mm-hmm. We learn, as we said before, about who their target is. Yeah. What the unique differences in their product are, whatever we can find about that customer and their products that we know the client will want to have, the customer will want to have. When we get that, then we can start to plan where within the budget we can best find the most people to give the best message. And that may be television, it may be radio, it may be newspapers, it could be magazines, it can be billboards, it can be all sorts of matter. And of course, more and more now, digital media comes into it as well.
Of course, yeah. Okay. Well, something that we've talked about before we got started today is you're quite interested in educating people about mistakes they might be making with their media strategies or their marketing. So what do you think are the biggest blunders that businesses, big and small, are really making in their marketing strategies and their media buying?
This is going to sound awful, but the reality is a lot of companies will get very close with their media rep and may not look outside the square. Now, every rep has the perfect solution for your problem,
of course.
But they're all in competition with one another. So Women's Weekly and Women's Day will each have a special deal, but you have to get your target right to know which one's which. There's two completely different radio networks, each with dozens of different radio stations. And just because MediaWorks has one doesn't mean to say that's going to work for your other. Or ZB, which is the number one station, may not work for the, or doesn't work for the younger demographic. So again, the rep is someone that you need to go and question, and you need to look at the competition. And if that doesn't work, then you need to come to someone like us, where of course our costs, we don't have a cost. Our cost is covered by the media. So it doesn't cost anything to come and talk to us. And of course, more importantly, there's some things when we'll go back and say, stick with your rep because that's the best you've got. But I'm happy as part of the Takapuna business to talk to anybody at any time and give them the advice and tell them which way is the best direction. Because I think, I mean, I've been a Takapuna member now for 25 years, so it's part of the more we can get Takapuna working, the more I'm going to get business as well.
I agree, absolutely. Yeah. So how much time would you suggest a business spends on the creative formulation, on the strategy, and on the implementation to really successfully deliver a marketing campaign?
It is a bit of string, but ironically, if they're talking to someone that understands it and has gone through the first processes of what they're doing, you know, advertising is really what it is, where you get it and how it works. If you get those three parts of your campaign correct, then you're 90% of the way there. Then it becomes how do you portray that creative message, and and once you've got those in place, then it will start to click pretty well. And radio stations, advertising agencies, creative agencies, unaccredited agencies, they've got a lot of ideas there to help you out.
Great. When do you think it's a good time to start this process with a business?
Before you start to spend any other money.
Great.
Because the minute you start to spend money without doing the foreplanning, you're never sure. You're throwing money at a wall and hoping it will stick.
Okay.
There's no need to. If you take your time and you go through this planning process, then you will find that there is quite a clear pathway through. Great. And not all of us get it right. You know, I've got many clients that have come to me that have lost a lot of money before they've come to us, and I've also had clients that we have gone down the track and thought we had it right, but the customer for some reason or other isn't there. Now you look at it and you say, is the media right? Is the product right?
Right.
Is the demand there? And all of those questions have to come in, because if you get all your ducks in a row, it should work. If it's not working, then you can start to say what is not right. And it may be the product is the wrong time for it.
Right.
I've got a whole range of product in Canada. I took over to start a business in there and it never worked. Products work brilliantly in New Zealand, it would not work in Canada. So it's not always interchangeable from one place to the other.
Right. Okay, that's fantastic. It's
you
really good.
I didn't.
Oh well, no, but it's fantastic news. To hear that you've got that sort of case study and you can use that to help others from your own experience. Yeah. What budget would businesses usually need to spend, do you think, with an agency if they're doing placement like this?
Again, budgets are very difficult. Depending on how you're selling, if you're a retailer, you've got the main part of your retailer is to get someone to come to your store, and therefore you may use loss leader products or you may use something else. Get them in, and then the selling takes place. The advertising will normally only get you to the source of the product.
Right.
Now there is direct response where the advertising does the whole job, right up to making the phone call and making the calls. In which case you're probably talking 20-25% of the retail value of your product.
Oh yeah.
But if you're talking about retail, then you're probably talking 4 to 6% of your turnover. So those are, and they're rough guides. I mean, some people don't spend anything. Other people will spend more because they know that the more they're spending, the more it turns over. Okay. And there are a lot of companies in Takapuna. You look at, many don't advertise at all. They rely on foot traffic to handle it. They're very lucky. There are other companies within the area who do advertise that create the foot traffic.
Of course, yeah.
And that's why associations quite often are better to start to coordinate a group area, because they can have a funding to somebody and then they can make the whole lot go.
Yeah, I totally understand that. Well, most of the listeners out there are small businesses and may not have any budget at all to invest in an advertising agency or using that sort of plan. What suggestions would you have to help them get the most value from their marketing budgets?
Word of mouth is always the best they can ever do.
Great.
There are all sorts of little promos you can. If you're a retailer with a window, use your window all the time, because that is your mobile billboard.
Right. So
if it means changing every day, if it means something that says "come on in," then that's all you want to do. You want to get them over the threshold. Then the smile and the personal service is going to win out every time. So if you can't afford to get into advertising and bring people to it, then you've got to draw them out of the crowd. And the best way to do that, the only way you can do that really, is to have a visual area at your point of sale.
Got you.
So wherever it is, it can be a flag on the footpath, it can be a special today's offer, it can be all of those things, because you're now competing as a retailer. You're competing against the grab ones and the one days and all those things that are dumping at very low cost, and that's competition.
Right.
So you have to have that unique difference.
Well, obviously, you would have noticed that over the years, media is really changing and evolving, and obviously the likes of social media are uprising now. How do you think that's impacting like advertising and media placement now, and is that something you'd also recommend?
Yes, it is, but it's a hard one, because social media is going through a lot of growing pains. Mm-hmm. A lot of people have already invested a huge amount of money. Go right back to when websites first started, mm-hmm. and people were spending tens of thousands of dollars on a website, but never told anybody that they had it. So therefore, they'd spent all this money, but they didn't know it was there. Now, of course, you expect everyone to have a website, and if they haven't, you ask the question, why not? Mm. And if you're a retailer, that website should be updated all the time, because that's your lazy way of shopping. People will go on the website. It's a perfect way for people to view what you have to sell and buy it without even getting out of their armchair. So that's part of it. But to expect people with social media just to go and look up your Facebook or your whatever, then you've got a problem.
Right, so you would definitely push website use over social media?
Absolutely. Or they should link. And it's the same with media. I mean, the big change in television over the last 12 months has been the massive upsurge of on-demand viewing. Yeah. And on-demand viewing is at the moment a very low-cost way of using television. Yeah. And it has the benefit that it's not cluttered with advertising. But if you are the ad, then you have a direct link from your advertisement on demand, which is from a computer of some sort, mm-hmm. or a smartphone, straight across to your website. So you're actually getting beyond just an advertisement, you're getting interaction with your clients straight away.
Absolutely. So what about the use of mobile devices as well? Would you highly recommend, if people are using, say, their website as their main sort of deliverable form of advertising, would you encourage them to have iPhone apps and things like that as well?
Certainly. Absolutely. The other part as well is to, in fact I should have gone right back at the first. The first part of designing a target market and thinking about what that target market does is think of someone in that age group and it might be a daughter, it might be a father, it doesn't matter what it is. Think of people in that group and what their habits are, and that identifies very quickly. Like, what does a 30-year-old do? Well, who do I know that's 30? What do they listen to? What do they watch? Where do they do? What sort of Facebook do they follow? Yeah. You'll get it from finding a clone of your target market that you know.
That's great advice.
And that's different to saying, well, I always listen to The Breeze, so therefore it must be a good station, when in actual fact your target don't listen to The Breeze at all. Yeah. So very important that you identify with someone you know, because then you can follow their habits and that will start to show you what they're doing.
That makes perfect sense. That's great. What trends do you expect to take place in terms of how businesses will choose to advertise in the near future?
I don't know, I'm going to run away.
Oh, you funny thing. Funny.
The changes are going to be so dramatic over the next few years that traditional media will be questioned. I think it will maintain its strength. Television is one that's going to suffer most, because instead of having a few channels, you've got a multitude of channels. Mm-hmm. Each of them are fragmenting the audience. Mm-hmm. And even now, there's massive fragmentation, but we know that you do an advertising campaign on television and people know about it, and it works. But if you think that 50% of New Zealand's population watch their television through a Sky decoder, which means they've got all the rest of those channels to watch, that's right. Then the other 50% are working or will be working through just an ordinary digital mobile, and they only have a short number of stations, which is why channels like Choice are starting to come up, because they're one of the few options that you've got on the digital platform. So everything is changing, and it's going to continue to change, and there'll be a lot of casualties come out of it. Right.
So on that sort of note, what's your view with regards to print media? Is that still on the decline, or is there still hope?
Print and particularly newspapers are a hard one to predict. We're all using our smartphones or our iPads to look at the Herald.
Yes, that's true.
But then when we look at a real Herald, we realise that we're missing the ads, which are a part of the whole paper. And there's all sorts of little snippets of information you find that you didn't really want to look at, but they're there. So the newspapers are suffering, and they're suffering quite heavily, but there's still a place for them.
So there is still value.
There's still value, but the big part of it has to be remembered that because they are suffering, they cannot hold those tremendous prices they used to charge many years ago.
So in some respects, that's good for marketing departments.
Absolutely, they've got to negotiate very hard and say, what is the best I can do?
Absolutely, that's fantastic. Well, here's a good question for you. Are you currently working on any campaigns at the moment that listeners should look out for, and that you may want to give your client a little plug for on our podcast? Who's a really special VIP you've got at the moment?
We have a total cross-section of clients within our group, and many of them have been with us for years. We've had the SETI beds, for example, from the time they first started in New Zealand. We've had the Biomag magnetic underlay from the time they first started in New Zealand.
Oh wow, really?
We've had Silverhorn Sportsville with all of their direct response products, and there's been a leaning towards direct response. We've had for many years we had Kraft Foods, which for a little agency to have one of the biggest companies in the world was quite a coup for us. We're the only agency in the world that wasn't aligned to the one multi-channel that was there. So there's a lot of it, but every client is just as important as the other one.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, that's been really enlightening for me to hear what you do and how your services work, not just for the Takapuna community, but for the greater community of the country and all that sort of business. I really, really enjoyed talking with you today, so thank you. And that wraps up the first episode of the Takapuna Beach Business Association podcast. A big thank you to Eddie Borrie for coming on the show today. You can get in touch with him through his website, mediabuying.co.nz. Once again, I'm Monique Bradley from Starlight Media House. Thanks for listening, and be sure to check us out online at starlightmediahouse.co.nz to subscribe to the next episode. See you next time.